Hey, welcome to Q&A, where you ask your questions on faith and life, and I do my best to give a biblical perspective. Let me bring up today's question here. Okay, when Jesus comes back, does the final judgment happen then, or is there a period of time between those two things? And that's a great question, and if you've been one of those people, and I know there's a lot who have been a little bit intimidated by the book of Revelation and never read it, this question has to do with timing within that. I'm going to assume from your question that when you say when Jesus comes back, you're referring to his second coming, not the rapture. There are those who would see the two as separate events. There were some who would see them as the same event, but it's just in two parts. And I'm going to assume that you're in that camp that sees them as two distinct, separate events. I would be in that camp too, for what it's worth. And then when you say the final judgment, I'm assuming you're talking about the final judgment we read about in the book of Revelation, chapter 20, verses 11 to 15. So to answer your question, maybe it's helpful to step back a little before we get to the judgment, to Revelation 20, and see what's happening and see whether that sheds some light on it. And of course, I think it's helpful to recognize in the midst of that when we talk about the final judgment, it's coming at the end of a series of judgments. It's not like there was the judgment of sin upon the cross, and then the next judgment is what we call about the final judgment. In the book of Revelation, we find a series of judgments, beginning in verse 16, where we have the seven bowls poured out. Each of those bowls is referred to a judgment. Of course, earlier you have the seven seals and the seven trumpets. And I know that there are some who would say that those are judgments as well. And I'm not saying they're not, okay? I'm not saying they're not. But the reason I'm referring specifically to the seven bowls is that unlike the bowls, which talks about them being judgments explicitly, the Revelation doesn't actually explicitly say that the seals and trumpets are judgments. So I'm just going to stick with what's safe. Again, I'm not saying the others aren't. If you've got a strong view on that, God bless you. I don't have an opinion on that. I'm just telling you why I'm sticking with the bowls. Okay. And so on that note, to understand what's happening, let's just you come to the end of those three series of seven, the seven seals, seven trumpets, and the seven bowls in chapter 16, which talks about them as judgments there. Of course, the first one is poured out on the people who've borne the mark of the beast as judgment on them. They're covered with boils. The second goes over the sea. It turns to blood. Third goes on to all of the fresh water. That turns to blood. And we're told it's because people had shed innocent blood and they were being judged for that, and now they will drink blood. Fourth one is the sun becomes incredibly hot and scorches and burns all those who cursed God. They're being judged for their rebellion, for their arrogance against God. The fifth one is poured out on the throne of the beast, and his kingdom is plunged into darkness. Of course, you can see parallel between the plagues in Exodus and these judgments as well, can't you? And so it points to, of course, we know what happens at the end of the plagues, and so you know that God is building. Each one is building on the other, so you know God's setting up for something more. The sixth one was the Euphrates, and it dries up, and out of that, all of the armies are called to gather to face Jesus at the Battle of Armageddon. And then the seventh one is poured out in the air, and there's thunder, there's earthquakes, and we hear the voice, "It is finished." The cry of God, "It is finished." Again, connecting the work of Christ, where sin is judged, with what is about to happen as well. And then we read that after that Satan is bound for 1,000 years. We have the millennial reign of Christ, and that happens and that happens in Revelation chapter 20. We see all that happening there, and in verse 11 through to 15, we read that at the end of that, the millennial reign of Christ, that 1,000 years where Christ is reigning, that Satan is let out and the final judgment happens. So for me, a plain reading of the chronology in Revelation says that there is a gap between the second coming of Christ and the final judgment. Christ comes and inaugurates his kingdom rule. There's that 1,000 years, then there's the final judgment. So yeah, that's how I would see it. Hey, you may have different views. I would love to hear them. Why not comment? Put a comment below. Let's see where we fall. But hey, if you got questions on faith and life, feel free to jump over to slido.com. Use the hashtag askhamish. I'd love to hear from you. But that's it for now. Until next time, God bless.